I managed to get in the cab, go to Cabra. I just scored out the window back then. Like, I was in the cab. I didn't get out of the cab. I remember the corner I pulled up on. I bought 2 caps. I went back to the hospital. I managed to get back upstairs to my hospital bed or to the bathroom. I used the heroin, hopped back into bed, and then my leg was just pissing out blood because I'd busted staples out of my leg in trying to do this, right? And I remember buzzing up and then them coming to help me. But that was the day I realised I am a drug addict.
Okay, life can be crazy. You're feeling like you're sinking, just trying to find a meaning. It's time for better thinking, yeah, better thinking. Time to tune in. Let's go.
Welcome to this episode of Better Thinking. I'm interviewing Danny Shannon, who's a recovering drug addict, and we're really going through his story from addiction through to recovery. This is part 1 of a 2-part series, and this part we really delve into what addiction really looks like. Danny's story is fascinating. He goes through the absolute wars through addiction, jail, recovery, and trying to get into that. You're going to be absolutely blown away.
I've been looking forward to this episode of Better Thinking podcast for a little while now. My guest is someone who wouldn't usually come on so far in our episodes because we've traditionally had psychologists or professors, people who have gone out and maybe looked at the world in a little bit of a different way from a professional sense. But today, what excites me so much is we've got Danny Shannon, who has lived experience, very much so in the world of drugs and alcohol, and he's been able to go out and use this experience to go out and help others, and hence, in looking at better thinking, I think it's great to be able to pick Danny's mind. So, Danny, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, Nesh, thank you very much for the introduction, and it's an absolute pleasure to be invited onto your show, mate. I'm looking forward to sharing anything you'd like to know and talking a little bit more about what I do.
Fantastic. Look, I think what intrigued me first in obviously reaching out to you and inviting you in was some of the videos that I've seen in the work that you do, and particularly because you've got lived experience, and I think that stands for so much. I think sometimes psychologists, health professionals, psychiatrists, people around the world, we get caught up in our books, and as much as they can be helpful and they are obviously of great value, it's also important that we look at lived experience and life, and so I thought, wow, here's an opportunity. Danny sounds like he's the man to approach. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about Danny.
Thanks, Nesh. Just before I go on and talk a little bit about myself, I just want to acknowledge that I've done a little bit of study and work and a bit of university as well. I'll get into it a little bit further, but about 8 years ago, I was 2 years clean and sober from drugs and alcohol, and I was working really hard in a labouring job. It was a job where I was working with alcohol and bar operations, which wasn't a suggested thing in my early days of recovery. But I found myself working long hours, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and start studying. So I went and did a Cert 4 in community services. Then I went on to do a diploma, and then I went on to do a Bachelor of Counselling, which I'm right at the end of completing. So, but look, as you mentioned as well, my lived experience is really, it's what landed me at the job that I've been working in for the past 8 years now as well. So, look, anyway, back to about me. You say you want to just hear a little bit about my story.
And look, I don't even know where the story starts. How old it starts. Obviously, feel free to kind of chat as to whatever you're comfortable about. But I'm intrigued.
Okay, cool. Nesh, look, so I'm involved in Narcotics Anonymous. This is basically where my whole life began, and I just want to mention that first of all, is because one of our traditions, and just the name Anonymous kind of implies that we don't talk about stuff, which is absolutely true. But on some levels, especially participating in this kind of stuff, I think it's important that I do share my story. And I'm not going to talk about NA as such at all, but just to mention that stuff, for the last 10 years or 9 years, I've pretty much kept my story a bit of a secret. Not a secret, but unless someone's looking for help or needs my help, I don't openly go out there and mention, hey, I'm a recovering addict and I've got experience to share with you. But since building or connecting within the business world and some of the other work that I'm doing these days, I've just discovered how valuable my experience actually is, and people actually want to know about it. So get me started, and now I don't shut up. Like, I just want to share the story. It's so cool and amazing. I had no idea of this whole world, this business world, and LinkedIn, the connections that I've made over the last 6 months. It's just opened my eyes up to a whole new world, which I guess I just wasn't ready to see until recently, But look, to go back, every now and again, and actually I did one on Monday, I do this thing called H&I, which stands for hospitals and institutions, right? What it is people in recovery like myself, we attend detoxes, hospitals, institutions basically, and go and share a little bit of our story, my story, So I get invited to attend them kind of regularly, maybe once every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. And what we do at those meetings is the kind of structure is focus on what it was like, how I got here, and what it's like now. So I'm happy to share a little bit of that with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, for me, I came from a really, I think, a good background. Like, I had a really loving mum who was always there supporting me, right? So the reason I mention this is because when I first began my recovery journey and involved with people, I used to compare myself a lot to other people's stories. Like, you hear about a lot of childhood abuse, all that abusive stuff that happens within the family systems at times and has a massive impact on people. But what I want to acknowledge and share with you is that drug addiction is such they call it a disease, the disease of addiction. When I say disease, if you break that down and just call it a dis-ease of self, something that I was never comfortable within myself. But my point is, when I picked up, I never touched drugs until the age of 14. But basically from the day I picked up at 14, I never stopped till the age of 33. So I had this addiction in me, like whether it was before I picked up or whether it was, I don't know what it is exactly, but what I do know for a fact is it didn't matter about my background, my religion, who my connections were. What it was the minute I picked up, I just never stopped until I found recovery.
You feel like it's in your makeup, I'm hearing. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, look, it definitely was in my makeup. I don't believe for me it came through like through a family thing. Like, I'm the black sheep of my family. Like everyone else in my family, my dad's another story, but the rest of my family, there was no addiction in our family, but yet I turned into this person who, threw everything away to just keep chasing the drug addiction, So 14, I picked up.
How did that happen? How did you find yourself in front of drugs at age 14? And did it was it an act by accident? You kind of stumble in like what a lot of young boys do. How did that come about?
Yeah, cool. It's a story that I actually do share kind of often. The way I remember it, okay, I mean, it was a long time ago, but my family, my mum and dad and my sister and I, we moved up to Bundaberg, right? And the reason we did that was, I don't know, we're probably running from something, but I knew someone who lived in Bundaberg already. He was a little bit older than me. His name's Ricky, and sorry to put you in it, Ricky, but the first night I arrived up there, right, I got drunk, stoned, and partied for the first time in my life. So I was just exposed to this new. I'd kind of been sheltered for some reason from it up until then, but we went out to the local skating, roller skating ring, and I just remember that I had my first drink, and I think I smoked pot for the first time, and also some other things as well. So, and here's the thing, like, I got pretty sick and intoxicated that night. I think normal people or most people would regret and feel like that was a mistake. That was kind of like the beginning for me. You know, I was like, wow, how do I do it again? You know, and it kind of just eventuated from there. So, yeah, it was a little probably peer pressure somewhere along the line. You know, like I didn't know what I was doing.
A bit of a cool factor at age 14. Yeah, is that what you mean? Like,
yeah, I think,
you know, I'm 14. I'm at a skate rink.
Yeah.
You know, some beer or wine or whatever it was, and some pot and whatever else you took.
Yes.
This is pretty cool. You know, it's a bit new.
Yeah, I think so, Nesh. I think that's what it was, and not just that. There was girls. There was no parents. It was very exciting, you know. Like I remember, the roller skating ring was shut. It was an outdoor one, so it was after hours, right? That we were there, and I kind of remember visualizing just having fun, you know, enjoying it. But as I said, that was almost the beginning of the end for me. Like at the age when I first picked up, because the way I remember it is, I really didn't miss one single day after that without having a cigarette or drinking a beer or wine, or started to use amphetamines early at that, a little bit older, maybe 15, LSD. There's this other thing called nitric oxide cream bulbs.
What's that?
It's like basically like a butane gas that you would inhale, and it would just. That was my first exposure to that whole world, was alcohol, pot, and cream bulbs.
Yeah, well, why were they called cream bombs?
Well, people out there probably might know a little bit more about it, but what it is, it's a little cartridge that they use to whip cream. Like it powers up a little pressurized bottle, and then it whips the cream out. So they're called. I think that's what they're called, cream bulbs. That's what we called them anyway, you know.
Yeah. So after that night, did you basically find yourself, you know, either drinking or using something the following day or that week, or was there a delay after? How did that sort of form?
Yeah. You know, I wonder, Nesh, and it's really good to be able to. I've never really shared the whole story like we are right now, which is, it's good. Like normally I have 15 minutes when I share my experience, strength, and hope at these meetings that I was talking about. So, look, now I think probably the next day I smoked pot again. I wasn't at that time. I don't remember needing or wanting it. But I was just with that crew of people, and we just did it again. And maybe it was school holidays. What happened was, I just got introduced. I think it would have been slower. Probably would have been over the next couple of weeks. I started to do it a little bit more regularly. And then what happened, right, there was a bit of that's when my family kind of broke down. My mum ended up leaving Bundaberg and coming back to Sydney, right? And then I was left with my dad. And my dad and I, he enabled me my whole way through all of my, not to put a negative thing on my dad, he's the best, but he somehow enabled me. And so I stayed with him, and next thing you know, he was traveling a lot overseas. So I'm only 14 and a half, and he would leave and left me in a unit. And every time he came back from overseas, we were kicked out of the unit because I was having parties, drinking alcohol. I remember falling through a wall on one of the units, or getting smashed through a wall. So I'm going a bit off track, but
that's all right. How long would Dad leave at a time?
I think about 10 days. You know, he used to travel overseas. My dad, he's definitely got some kind of addiction in him. You know, like I said earlier that it doesn't run in my family, but I think my dad doesn't use drugs or alcohol, but he's just got this compulsive nature, which I've picked up absolutely. You know, so he used to go away for 10 days at a time or something like that, and it happened 3 times. He went over overseas, and he'd come back, and we'd be evicted. You know, and this first time he copped it. The second time it was like he still copped it. And the third time he moved back to Sydney. And I basically was left up by choice. This is my family's leaving me in Bundaberg, but I remember maybe by the age of 15, I was living at friends' houses, and for a little while anyway. I didn't last long. It lasted about 3 months, and I came back to Sydney and followed my family. But that was really when I started to pick up the more serious stuff like the amphetamines and the LSD, and that's really when the addiction kicked off, I think. So I reckon maybe from the time I arrived in Bundaberg, over the next 6 months, I really started to become addicted to mind and mood altering substances, you know.
And at that point, how often are you using? Sort of most days of the week, a few times a week?
I think so, mate. Look, by that time, I was never actually a big drinker. Like, I did start off in the alcohol, but alcohol has never really been part of my story since then. It moved into pot mostly, so there'd be smoking marijuana every single day, and I think I did that for the next 10 years, every single day. Like, I couldn't miss that. But on top of that, there'd be, in the early days, it was just the amphetamines and a little bit of LSD. But at the age of 16, I picked up heroin for the first time. By this time, I was back in Sydney. You know, I mentioned this. I used to be a really popular kid when I was younger. I had a lot of friends. My mum used to facilitate like this. You know, like I was the guy that all the friends would come over to the house on the weekend, and I used to skateboard ride, actually, and I was quite a good skater, and we used to always build skateboard ramps in the backyard. So my house after school or on the weekends would always be full of the boys coming over to skate because we'd have ramps in the backyard. And the reason I just mentioned that is in the early days, before I picked up heroin, I had a lot of friends, but basically I remember the day I picked up heroin for the first time. I absolutely remember it because even though I'd touched everything else by now, that was one that I was always scared of, and I don't think I really even wanted to pick it up. I remember we were out the front of this house in Abbotsbury, and my mate, who I call my co-offender because me and him were like partners in crime for a long time, he said, "Colin, we're going to get some heroin." And I remember sitting in the car at the front of his house thinking, this is a bad idea, you know? Yeah. But again, probably peer pressure of some sort, but also curiosity.
Something inside you at that time, you seem like you're reluctant or hesitant. You know, you were kind of
scared.
Go into heroin. Was it scared? You say?
Yeah, I think I was just scared. Like, I don't think I didn't want it exactly, but I was just scared. Like, I heard about what that heroin does. You know, it's actually no worse than or alcohol. I would just say is probably the worst drug out there. But anyway, one thing I know for sure about my story is from the first day I picked up heroin, I never put it down for the next 17 years, basically. So that was it.
What was it about heroin that made it, you know, the drug of choice? Having, you know, you'd experienced many different drugs, and you know, obviously there was lots of different challenges and turmoil at that time, but you stuck with heroin. Why? What is it about heroin that makes it just so attractive?
Yeah. It's weird talking about because it's not bad talking about, but it's so, like, I can explain it almost. It was like it was just different to everything else. And this is where that addiction comes from. Like, it was like I had it, I smoked it for the first time, and it was like, wow, I feel like this feeling coming over my whole body that just made everything okay, like just like that. And not just okay, but a little bit euphoric, but just like, as you know, probably like heroin's not, when I say euphoric, it's not as if you're like off. Yeah, it's like a calmness or something. Yeah. One of the side effects of heroin, especially in the early days, is nausea too, right? And this is crazy, but you'd vomit, like you'd spew, like this power spew. Excuse me for mentioning it, but and you'd love it. Like, it was the best part of it. Strangely enough, and this is very common amongst my community of people in recovery. They understand what I'm talking about. It's quite a horrible thing to actually say out loud, but yeah, that was, I can't quite explain, but you can see, even it's almost like, it's not that I'm mesmerized or fantasizing about what it was like, but I do. It had such an impact on me, Like, I just remember this warm feeling, and everything was really good all of a sudden,
Kind of like, I'm kind of sensing like you're kind of describing how in awe you were with, you could feel so so calm, so kind of at peace to maybe what was going on around you. I'm not sure if I'm sort of stretching the bow a bit far, but just amazed that it got you to that feeling, that point.
Yeah, look, I just want to mention again, if I mentioned in the beginning that, so it wasn't my family, it wasn't my life. Everything was actually all right anyway, but still. So I can understand how people who come from a real horrible background, how they become addicted to it. But even so, I still had a pretty good, like, I had all those friends, but still, it still just gave me that exact same feeling that it does for, exactly as you just
So
explained.
it's not to go out and escape anything. It's more because you enjoy it. That feeling is just so attractive to you. Well, at the time.
Yeah, it wasn't to escape anything in the early days. It wasn't. Yeah. So look, that was it. That was definitely the beginning of the end when I picked up heroin. Within 6 weeks, we were stealing from, like, what happened was, my mate who I mentioned earlier, me and him we'd organised this little scam somehow, because heroin's quite expensive too, but somehow another guy that we got involved in it with us in the early days, he funded it for us for the next 6 weeks, basically, right? And that all came undone in 6 weeks' time with his family. He got caught, I don't know, stealing money or whatever it was we were doing. And my family found out that they already knew I was dibbling and using drugs, but it wasn't a massive problem. Like, it hadn't caused harm yet, But 6 weeks later, the whole family found out, and my girlfriend at the time, like, they tried to lock me up for a couple of days, I remember. And what happened in those couple of days, and this is the next level, my mate that I've mentioned a couple of times, he, needles, right? It's horrible to mention this too, but I remember thinking always I would never touch a needle, and somehow in that few days where I got locked up on my family, my mate had gone over to the drug dealer's house in Cabramatta and had his first shot. And I remember, so I get out of that little situation being locked up, and I met up with Brad again, and he tells me that he's had his, he injected heroin. And so all of a sudden, this is the insanity. All of a sudden, I've gone from never, ever wanting to do that or to being jealous that he's gone and done it without me. And that was it, mate. It just went downhill even more from that day. I broke out of that little restriction I was in with the girlfriend and the family, and we went to the drug dealer's house, and I remember I was sitting in a flat in Cabramatta. It was pretty chatty flat. This guy's a drug dealer, right? We're sitting on the floor. I picture there's no furniture, fuck all furniture anyway. We're sitting on the floor and he injected me for the first time, Nesh, and yeah, it was kind of like another level of that warm feeling I talked about before, and then I probably never missed a day of injecting for the next 15 years, and my life, I wouldn't even say slowly went downhill. I was in prison within months. It was boys' homes at the time because I was only 16, but I was locked up.
What were you locked up for?
I'd stole some checks. The first thing I think I got locked up for was I stole some checks from this nice guy employed me, right? And I remember I went into their office and I stole a checkbook, and I, not really knowing what I was doing, but I wrote a check to myself, and I signed somebody's signature, and anyway, it cashed. I got the money and I used it, and yeah, I got caught for that, so they locked me up for that. And I also had some warrants for fines or something else that I couldn't get out of. So even though the check fraud you can get bail on, but these other things, I forget what they were called. There's some kind of, when you have fines back then, if you owed and had gone to the enforcement agencies, you had to get locked up in custody for, it was $100 a day or something. They'd lock you up. Mm. So I think I did like 14 days in like a boys, I think it was Cobbin back then. So that's when, my point is
that came out of desperation to be able to get the money to be able to feed the addiction.
Yeah, definitely.
How did you go being locked up, not being able to use during that time?
Yeah. Look, it's a funny thing about heroin addiction. When you don't know about withdrawals, for example, the first time you just think you've got a cold or something. That's how I remember it. Like, this doesn't feel right. Yeah, but as time goes on, you start to understand what hanging out is and what withdrawals are, and you can't go a day. I couldn't go a day. But so look, to be honest, back then I would have been young, fit, healthy. It didn't affect me that bad because I wasn't using massive amounts yet. I just started, like, I think we were starting on half a cap, which is like $15 worth back in the very beginning, so I didn't have a big habit as such. So I don't recall that. I was probably spinning out, scared shitless about where I am and what I was doing to worry about that, But as time went on, I also kept getting locked up, and I went to prison. I think probably on my 18th birthday, I was locked up in Parramatta prison. And between the age of 18 and 28, I did over half of that time locked up. So I got on the methadone, actually. I don't know if methadone is like a replacement therapy for heroin. You could call it like government. They call it liquid handcuffs in my world back then, because we'd have to turn up at the clinic every day to get our dose, and the police would know where we were coming because we'd have to get our dose and they'd grab you, if they were looking for you. So,
okay. You were desperate enough that you'd go out and get the methadone, even though there's a high risk of the police being there. It was still worth the risk.
Yeah, it's not even like I thought of it like that, because you never think you get caught almost, like you didn't know that they were looking. But I think more liquid handcuffs is just about you almost can't leave the suburb because you have to get to that clinic every single day to pick up your dome, And the reason I got on that was because by the age of 21 I got on it, right? By the age of 21 I'd already spent probably maybe 12 months in prison, right, from the age of 18 to 21. And I kept going in and hanging out. Withdrawals was terrible by then. It was the worst. So I kept going into jail, and I thought, I need to get on the methadone. At least the methadone, they give it to you in custody. In New South Wales, they don't in Queensland. I think you also experienced
so you'd
that.
get the methadone while you're in custody?
Yeah, you do. So
okay.
it's like even though they put you through some therapy to get it, the first dose again, but it is government, it's meds, it's medication. They have to give it to you, you know, but they'll probably intentionally make you hold out for as long as, you know, a bit of therapy. But anyway, the point is I got on that at 21, and that was because I just knew my life moving forward was more jail, and I thought at least if I had the methadone, I wouldn't hang out. Yeah. God, the story's all over the shop, eh? It's hard to actually in detail explain my story. I've got no problem with it. I'm absolutely happy to, but it's a little bit over the place. So I
a little bit
apologize.
hazy for you.
Yeah, but look,
so methadone was in some sense introduced to you through the justice system, or something that you kind of heard around the traps and said, hey, I might try that because, you know, obviously if it's costing me so much and I can't necessarily get my hands on it all the time, this is the next best thing.
A bit of both.
Or another, yeah, a bit of both.
Yeah, a bit of both. It absolutely was introduced to me by the justice system because I knew if I was on the methadone, I wouldn't hang out. And not only that, the methadone.
What does hang out mean? What does hang out mean?
Withdraw.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. Thank you for asking.
That's the street term in terms of that. When you're starting to kind of hang out for it, I really need some. You're starting to feel the cravings, strong cravings.
Yeah, hanging out when the nose starts to get runny, you feel nauseous, your legs are kicking. That's hanging out. You know?
Okay.
That's
the signal to go out and score.
Eh?
That's the signal to go out and score.
Well,
before then.
The idea is never to get to that point.
No. Yeah, that's the mindset. You can't. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Not just the mindset. That's a good point too. Like, the horrible thing about addiction is, right, you think you're chasing that stone, but then the minute you get that stone, you're actually chasing, where am I going to get the next stone? So it's almost like becomes you. It's like you don't even enjoy it anymore, because it's as soon as you get it, your mind's on, how do I get the next one? How do I get the next one? So it's kind of like either a constant state of stoned or a constant state of panic trying to get stoned, you know?
It's kind of like an obsession. It becomes your kind of, your focus, and hence why you don't care whether there's going to be police there or anything. You're not thinking about those things. You're just thinking about, how do I get my next one?
All right. When I was 18, or maybe I was 17, somewhere along that, I got my bike license, my motorbike license, right? My poor mum funded. Mum was always trying to encourage me to move forward and do and have a life, So I think somehow she bought me a bike, or she went guarantor for me to get a bike, because I probably said I had a job or something. And anyway, I had a very serious motorbike accident in Cabramatta, actually, just after scoring and getting on, buying drugs. And anyway, I was in a coma for I think it was about 3 days, right? I had a fractured femur and I had a head injury. And here's the insane part, right? I remember I woke up out of this coma, or whatever it was, medically induced coma, and I'm well into my addiction by this stage, right? And I was actually coming from scoring, as I mentioned. So I hadn't had any heroin for 3 days. And when I came to, I remember all my family standing around me, right? Probably horrified of that. And in the next bed, right, there's a guy who's in a coma as well. This is how I'm imagining it. He's in a coma as well. I can't see him. There's a curtain pulled, but I can hear his visitor there saying to him that she's putting some money in his top drawer. And she's saying her goodbyes to him, like she'll be back in case he needed money. And somehow, Nesh, I've convinced my family that I'm not in a position to see them, and I made them all go. I managed to get up out of bed with staples and a busted femur, steal this guy's money. It was $100, right? And I think I got on some crutches. I walked downstairs. I got a taxi to Cabramatta. I was only at Liverpool Hospital, so I got a cab to Cabra. So I got $100, right? I can get 2 cabs for $50 and $50 for a cab fare there and back, right? I managed to get in the cab, go to Cabra. I just scored out the window back then. Like, I was in the cab. I didn't get out of the cab. I remember the corner I pulled up on. I bought 2 cabs. I went back to the hospital. I managed to get back upstairs to my hospital bed or to the bathroom. I used the heroin, hopped back into bed, and then my leg was just pissing out blood because I'd busted staples out of my leg in trying to do this, right? And I remember buzzing up and then them coming to help me. But that was the day I realised I am a drug addict. Like, I don't know how the hell I managed to pull that off, but I managed to, with a broken leg, a head injury, managed to steal someone's money, go to Cabra, get on, come back, use it, and then surrender, press a button to get help because my leg was bleeding and I busted all these staples out of my leg. So that's just one little story of the compulsion and obsession, as I mentioned, you know?
Yeah. How did you explain to the nurses what had happened?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I think I said I went for a smoke or something, which I did too. I would have gone for a smoke after that. Like, it's
You
like
didn't care, I
there's some
suppose.
demon in you, driving you, you know? Like, there's nothing that ever stopped me from pursuing my drug addiction, you know? My son, who was born on the 27th of June 2001, I remember, so I was well into my addiction. I remember I looked horrible back then, but I remember when she got pregnant, Michelle, his mum, us saying, I was on the methadone by then anyway, but us saying that we're going to stop using drugs now. You know, we've got a son, we've got a baby coming. It's like, I think back to it, it's just delusional. Like, there's nothing, not a child, not a parent, nothing in the entire world that was more important to me than using drugs. So it's great that I thought I'd like to stop it. I'm going to change my life now. We've got a baby coming. And poor Josh, my son, you know, didn't have parents who did that. Like, there's nothing in the world that was more important to me than using heroin, you know. That's another horrible story, you know, but
It just shows, I suppose, the inside of what it looks like to you know, genuinely be addicted, where the drive, you know, pulls you out of a hospital bed where your femur's shattered and you've just come out of a coma and you've got stitches from surgery and you know, you even in that state you're able to rob someone, get yourself a cab, you know, get to Cabramatta, come back, you know, use and then jump in the bed, you know, with really total disregard of your own well-being. You know, that could have been, you know, life-threatening and probably didn't even cross your mind.
I smile, but like, and just so you know, for future me smiling, like, I don't kind of regret my past at all because the life I have today is all a product of my past, and the gratitude I have and the smile I have and the serenity I have today is all because of the shit I've done and been through, you know. Like, I've hurt people and I hate that, but anyway, like, I just mentioning because it's just amazing. I can't believe it's like I was like this demon, there's nothing, and I'll just say it again, there was nothing that could ever get in the way of me picking up and finding means and ways to get more, you know.
Yeah.
I used to live and I went hard at it.
What eventually did get in the way? Obviously there was a turning point, something happened. Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, maybe what that was, or maybe the lead up to that point?
Yeah, You know, we say
Because I could talk about your past forever.
Yeah.
I could listen to this and hear, because I think that story is intriguing in kind of trying to stand in the shoes of that level of obsession. You know, that anything, there's, as you say, nothing will get in the way.
Yeah, it's kind of it's unexplainable, really, isn't it? In words, exactly. Look, and there's a little saying, and I can get caught up in that too. That we call that neg raving, yeah, and like
Call that
negative
what?
raving. Neg raving, like,
Okay.
and it's not something I do often, and it's certainly not suggested in your early days of recovery to plug in and neg rave about all the bad times. But I don't get to do it much these days, so it kind of strangely excites me, to talk about that stuff. But we also call that the mess, so if I want to talk about the message, which is what you're talking about, how I got here, and like what it's like now, again, it goes back to my mum. All right, my mum was always there pushing and supporting me to get help, and I want you to know that I went to my first detox or rehabilitation center. I wouldn't have even been 18. I would have maybe 17. I think there used to be this place called, there's a whole heap of them, but McKinnon House, Basement 82, Cumberland Hospital. I used to attend these places all the time, and I would always go there because my mum had pushed me to go there. It was a detox. That's where it starts, You need to detox from the drugs and then possibly get introduced to like Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, and then maybe seek treatment further at being a rehabilitation center. But to answer your question, so I'd done that from the age of, say, 17 to 33 with no success. I was.
How many times do you think you went?
Oh,
if you had to throw a guess out there.
I would have to say 50 times.
50, wow.
Yes. Mate, there's one place in the end called Gorman House, right? That's at St. Vincent's Hospital in Sydney. I reckon I had 15, 20 admissions to that place, But here's the thing, like, I'd go there and I'd leave the next day. So it goes back to mum. I always had this supportive network pushing me and encouraging me to do it. So I'd go, and this is the disease of addiction, I'd go, yeah, I want to change, but then I'd get there and I'd start withdrawing and I'd be jumping the fence, I'd be robbing someone, or I'd find some other hostage. When I say hostage, someone else who wanted to come with me, because I'd never want to do it by myself, and I'd leave, So
would you use on the way in so that you wouldn't have the withdrawals?
Yeah, of course. Like, it's ridiculous as well, but often if I had the opportunity, I'd be taking pills in there with me. When I say pills, I'm talking like sleeping pills, because that's what would help with withdrawals. Sometimes I'd go to detox, arrive stoned every single time. I never arrived in detox ever without being stoned. But sometimes I'd get there, use whatever I had with me, and then leave. Like, there was one place, Gorman House, they used to do this mad barbecue. It was funded by some wonderful organisation, the Maltese something. Anyway, they used to just put on a good barbecue. I used to just go there for a rest for a couple of days, basically, get stoned while I was there, and then leave as soon as I'd start to withdraw, Anyway.
So have a good barbecue.
Have a good barbecue. Not that I could even eat back then, but that was kind of like the niceness of the service,
Yeah.
Look, I'm neg raving again. Let's go back into what happened.
What was the turning point? Yeah.
The final turning point, right? I'd been on the methadone for 13 years, right? The methadone, the idea by the government, and it's not their fault, but is that you get on it for 6 months. That's what I heard in the beginning. Get on it for 6 months. It's going to help you deal with your withdrawals to heroin. It's going to give you some quality of life to move forward, because it kind of does, because you're constantly stoned. So you're not chasing heroin anymore. So you might be able to get a job and stuff. The idea is you get on it for 6 months, I think. But the fact is, anyone that gets on it doesn't ever get off it, or they get off it 13 years later, like myself, you know. So the first step was for me to
How
get
many
off
milligrams were you taking?
that. Look, at
Or
one
mils?
stage I was up to 180, which is a big dose.
180 mils.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a big dose.
I was never on any less than 80. Like, see, going back to the negative stuff again, if you were on too much methadone, you wouldn't get any result from heroin anymore. My point was never to stop. I never say I used heroin for years while I was on the methadone as well. It kind of defeats the entire purpose of it. But 90% of people, I shouldn't say that because I don't know the stats, but all the people I knew on methadone were still chasing heroin on a daily basis, you know. It was just like a backup in case you couldn't get it. So at least you'd have that to fall back on so you wouldn't withdraw. Anyway, I was on that for a long time, right? And a big dose as well. So it had sunken into my bones. It was part of my whole system, the methadone. So withdrawals from methadone are horrendous compared to heroin. Heroin takes 3 days, 4 days, maybe 5 days. Methadone takes like solid 6 weeks of withdrawals, you know, like so it's not one you can get off easy, you know. And
Much harder to get off, yeah.
Yeah, it's harder
like.
to get off. I'd got locked up a couple of times, and I hadn't had my dose for 2 days, right? So one of the rules with the government is if you didn't pick up your dose for 2 days, they kick you off, right? So it would take some time to get on it again. So there was a couple of times when I was locked up in jail and they wouldn't give me my methadone. So I experienced those withdrawals cold turkey. It was a horrible, horrible thing to go through, you know. And also having that in mind, I never wanted to get off it because I never wanted to go through that on purpose, you know, get off it like feeling that stuff. Anyway, look, I was in detox for one of the last times. It was probably my third last time. It was at Gorman House again. And I rang some phone numbers out of the book. And I remember that when I say some phone numbers out of the book, they'd always encourage every client that comes in there to call other services to continue your recovery, yeah? There was one place called MTAR, which stands for methadone to abstinence reduction, right? And I remember thinking, I'm not getting off the methadone. Like, I used to say to people, it's just like being a diabetic. I just need my methadone every day. Or it's just like having your insulin every day. I was going to be on this for the rest of my life, yeah? And anyway, this guy called Crispin, he was the manager, he came out and did an assessment on me, right, that day. Like, so next thing you know, I've made this phone call because I'm a bit of a people pleaser and I want to do the right thing for my family and possibly for myself. And this guy comes out and does an assessment. So all of a sudden, I'm now talking to a guy about me coming off the methadone. I remember that being a scary thought. He rang me back that afternoon and said, Danny, you've been accepted. You can come in tomorrow. I remember thinking, like, what? You know, like, it was a shock, you know. And Nesh, as always.
What was shocking about it? What was shocking about it?
Well, the methadone was like this security blanket, yeah. I'd have a drink every single day, and within 20 minutes, that warm feeling I mentioned, like from the heroin, would come over me, and things would just be okay, you know. My security blanket is the best way to explain it. Yeah. So I'm not giving that up. Like, not just do I want to give that up, but knowing the withdrawals as well, so I can't do that. Anyway, as always, I got given the go-ahead, you're coming in tomorrow. I left detox. I remember I found this chick, I forget her name. She was another client, and we left the detox, and I went and had a big bender, yeah? Like, I got on the pills, I got on the coke, I got on the heroin, I probably got drunk, I had everything. But the thing is, I just thrown this opportunity to go into this methadone rehab away. But the next day I woke up and I remember thinking, what have I done? Like, this might have been an opportunity to change my life, and I rang them. And part of the deal was that I had to come to them clean, without any drugs in my system except for methadone. And he said to me, you know what? He said, He said, we're going to send you out to our other program and we're going to take you. So there's a miracle just happened. Like, and it happened because for the first time, I sort of rang up and I owned up to what I'd done wrong. And I said, look, I actually want help. And they said to me, look, we'll still take you. So they ended up taking me and they sent me to this stabilization house for a couple of weeks before I entered that program. And anyway, then
Is there something about that touches you?
Did I look like I got a bit emotional then or something?
Yeah, like there was something there.
Yeah, it's a bit of a spiritual awakening for me. There's like, it gives me goosebumps when I talk about it because, like, my life was going nowhere. I would be dead. I'm sure I would be dead today if it wasn't. Like, my life began that day completely. Like, the day I entered that methadone to abstinence reduction program was really the day my whole recovery started. You know? For the first time, I'd stayed more than 2 days in a place. I stayed for the whole 4 months, right? I got off the methadone, and because there's about 20 other people doing it, right? Because there's all these other people suffering as well, it kind of made the whole situation better, easier, because everyone's dropping down and reducing off their meds. So it kind of made it possible, basically. You know, I have big gratitude to that place, you know, absolutely. And I ended up getting off the methadone.
And what did you do in those 4 months?
Mate, therapy, like, it was horrible. When I say it was horrible, like, they used to do a morning group every day. We'd have to come to group at 8 a.m. And we do this thing where everyone goes around and I think talks about their feelings and stuff. Like, I haven't had a feeling for 13 years because I've been on the methadone for that whole time, you know, like, and I still didn't while I was on the methadone. But I remember when I got off it, all of a sudden I started to experience all these things that people were talking about: anxiety, fear, even happiness. You know, like, methadone covered all of that for so many years. You know, but anyway, what we do is, it was a therapeutic community. So, and what that means is, like, we all help one another. The clients basically help one another with the guidance of the staff. You know, so there was morning groups. We'd all have dinner together. We'd go to meetings, being Narcotics Anonymous meetings, once or twice a day, and get our methadone and start reducing as well, you know.
So it built a sense of a community as well. Did you feel you kind of connected with others that were suffering at the time? Don't want to put words into your mouth, obviously.
No, sure. Yeah. No, of course. Just the very, very, very tip of the iceberg, Nesh, because even though I was with good people who were on the same journey as me, it's taken me 10 years today in recovery, abstinent from any drugs or alcohol, to build. I understand just how difficult relationship building and intimacy is these days. It's not, but I was open to that stuff back then, and that's where it started, I guess. Even just having a laugh with the boys, putting shit on things, the program, like, it was all negative stuff, you know. It was never anything productive, you know. It was just the tip of the iceberg. But I started to get friendships with people that I'd never really had before, you know. So yeah.
And what gave you the, I don't know what the right word is here, but say courage or sort of motivation to start weaning, you know, to start reducing your dose?
I don't know, mate. I don't know. It must be my mum in the background always supported me. And I think I'll say God, like, I'm not religious in any way, even though I had a bit of a religious background. But when I say God, like, I do believe there's something out there looking after me, absolutely. Like, that story about the motorbike accident is just one of many death-defying events that I was involved in over the years, you know. So there was something looking after me and some level of surrender, some hope that I could have a better life, you know. Just a miracle, I guess, that I finally gave up the fight, you know.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
4 months rolls around. How do you prepare for going from being impatient, so to speak, to out in the wide world again?
Yeah, it's kind of not exactly the way it followed, because what happened was I got off it. I got off the methadone finally. So 13 years of being off the methadone, I finally got off it. Day one, I'll never forget it. Like, how do I explain it? Like, I didn't have a life at all. There was no possibility of me having a life while I was on it. It's not to say people who are on methadone don't have a life, but there wasn't for me, you know. But anyway, I started to experience all that stuff I mentioned before, the feelings, all this stuff I'd heard people talking about. But it didn't last. It didn't last long. Yes, I think it was 22 days, which is actually amazing now that I say it out loud. But in 22 days, I threw it all away, mate. I'd been hoping or wishing. This is a crazy thing. This is very common, but because I've been on the methadone for so long, I forgot what heroin was like without being on the methadone. It's insane, yeah? This is absolutely insane. So I had to use heroin again because because what the methadone did was it gave you high tolerance to it. So it was kind of a different feeling to heroin. Heroin was the ultimate euphoric feeling, you know? So anyway, I threw it all away to go and to have another shot of heroin, mate. Like, that's another story we could go on about for ages, right? But what happened then was I used heroin again. I threw it all away, but I was off the methadone. This is key. Like, the methadone is what never allowed me to move forward, I think.
I want to kind of get a bit of a grasp on what it was like. I know that you were out for 22 days before, you used again. But you kind of said that you started to experience the world, that it was different. Walking out of the methadone reduction clinic. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like, though, those 22 days? You know, walking out and was there still a conflict, a struggle, a tension inside, or did you feel like you were in peace for some of that period? How does that kind of look?
At peace for some of that period is so far from the truth, like, no way. It was just like, I look back on those days and I think, the insanity, the stuff that's going on, the head just never shuts up. It's like, it's the hardest thing, and this is why people struggle to get clean and stay clean, is just the crazy shit going on in my head. Like, all of a sudden I start, all right, let me take you back. Day one, right? I went to a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. Now, when you go to meetings, right, you might know a little bit about this, but basically people just get up and share their experience, strength and hope with the group. We share for about 5 minutes. We sit down and we listen to other people. Now, we talk about what it was like, how we got here, and what it was like now. Anyway, the point is, that's what happens at an NA meeting, right? But while we were in that treatment center, MTAR, you weren't allowed, even though I went to meetings every single day, you weren't allowed to get up and share. It was just one of their rules. It's not one of the rules of Narcotics Anonymous, right? But which was actually fantastic, right? Because I didn't want to, for one thing. But day one of the methadone, I was all of a sudden, I reached this whole new status. I'm allowed to share now, And this guy came and picked me up and took me to a meeting, and I remember getting asked to share, and I remember standing up. And I remember just being so nervous, and hanging out, so withdrawing, because day one off the methadone doesn't mean you're over the withdrawals. That's for sure. You're actually just really beginning. Anxious. I never experienced anxiety. I only know it now looking back at it. But I was anxious. I was overheated. Like I remember my head felt like it was burning up. But at the same time, there was this happiness coming through as well. So I don't know what I said, to be honest. I remember just saying I was embarrassed. I felt really scared to talk, but I just expressed that kind of stuff. And so it was like a whole new world to me, like I'd never experienced those feelings and emotions and stuff. And that insanity I was talking about earlier, it's hard to describe, actually. It's just like the head working overtime for the next 22 days until I eventually gave in and used again, I think I constantly thought about, for me, cocaine was a big one for me, even though heroin was the thing I used all the time. But I don't know, that's what I busted on the first, at that 22 days, was on coke. And it was because I don't know what it was. But anyway, then I got on the heroin again, but the same day. But yeah, that 22, it's almost indescribable, Nesh. I can't quite explain it, especially being on the methadone for so long. I woke up, like I remember day 4, and I describe this often. I know how to describe this. It was, say, 4 a.m., day 4 a.m. I'd had like 5 hot showers because withdrawals would cause your legs to be really aching and kicking. It was like one of the side effects of withdrawals, and a hot shower used to calm them down for a little bit. I remember just getting out of a hot shower, laying in bed. I'm in a room with probably another 5 other people in the service. They were probably asleep, the way I remember it. But I remember laying in bed, having this nice warm feeling because I had just got out of the shower, so my body felt pretty relaxed, and I just had this spiritual awakening, thinking, wow, look at all the possibilities that could be ahead of me, if I stayed off the drugs, I talk about that day often because that was my first spiritual awakening, Yeah, look, I don't know. Did I answer your question?
No, absolutely. That was kind of I suppose, a short moment in time where you were able to see other possibilities. Even though you were going through, your 4th shower, it was day 4 in the early morning, but it sounds like a moment at least of peace before the mind ramped up again and started kind of working overtime.
Do you know what, Nesh? Be aware, like I hadn't slept 10 minutes in that 4 days either. Like you don't. Withdrawals, for me anyway, some people deal with it differently, but for me, I don't think I slept 10 minutes in the 7 days. The first 7 days was just a constant. So that's a good explanation for that 22 days. It was madness, mate. It's withdrawing, the possibilities. So there's a little bit of a nice feeling too because you're off it and you're proud of yourself. And the day you get clean, you have a bit of a a clean day party with all the other people. So you've got all this good stuff. Well, it doesn't feel good, but it's good. Yeah, it's hard to explain,
That's interesting about it. Doesn't feel good, but it's good.
That's
it
doesn't
funny,
feel
isn't it?
good. Yeah, it's crazy to talk about. Thank you for bringing this stuff up for me. I really appreciate it. It's nice. It's really nice to talk about.
Look, I think it's really intriguing to get into that space, because here you are, everyone would be looking from the outside saying, wow, this guy's really turning it around. Whether it's at day 4 or day 9 or day 15, he's gone through this amazing program before for 4 months, he's committed. But in actual fact, you're just hanging by the tips of your nails. You're kind of white knuckling the whole time, just trying to bear it as in some sort of madness, just hanging on.
Totally, Nesh. Mate, like, I don't know which direction we're going in here. One thing I just want to mention. Do you know, in the last 10 years, right, and people from that service, I've probably known, and this is just crazy stats, I've probably known 100 people who are dead from heroin addiction as well. So what happens, right? And there was people back then when I was in the service dying, but we'd get off the methadone, yeah? Or even if it's just off the heroin and your tolerance would drop and people would use again. And this happened to me on so many occasions where I overdosed.
Is that because you use at the old level, you use at your previous level, or still too much than what you can tolerate?
Yeah, probably not the same as the old level, but still too much to tolerate. And, mate, I was so lucky. I probably overdosed 10 times. And, again, I'll go back to that God
What
thing.
happens when you overdose?
So it's like you're so stoned, that feeling that I talked about before, about that warm feeling. It's like this, right? That warm feeling comes over normally and then you sit in it. But when you overdose, it's like you're going to overdose. So it just keeps coming and gone. You're gone, It's like, it's kind of like that. And what would happen is every single time I could feel that coming, or I'd even know I was using too much, I'd walk outside somewhere and I'd make sure someone found me when I'd overdose. Like, I've had CPR put on me by ambulances that I've been in pain or bruising for days afterwards. And I knew it was going to happen. Like, I was so close to death. Well, I was dead many times, but I was just so blessed that I'd always get found by someone who would ring the ambulance or the police. I once overdosed and got hit by an ambulance. Like, I was in Cabramatta. Listen,
my apologies for laughing, but it's quite ironic.
It's insane. I was in Cabra. I'd used in one of the alleyways right off John Street, and I knew I used too much. And I walked out, and then I just blacked out on the road, and I got hit by an ambulance. Like, I walked into an ambulance. So obviously they were right there to fix me up straight away. But yeah, mate.
But it's interesting that you say that somehow you had enough wits about you that you knew you were taking too much, and you had to go take yourself somewhere to be found. At a bare minimum, that someone would stumble across you, that you were somehow in the eye of the public, that someone would eventually call someone to help you, even though you weren't in a kind of straight mind. There was still something that was kind of saying, Danny, get yourself out there.
Yeah. I guess I didn't want to die, mate. Yeah, and I knew my body. I know when you're having too much. This is the insane thing. Like, it's too much, but you'd still want it. Absolutely, because you want to get as stoned as you can. There was times where I'd use in a flat by myself, and like the girlfriend, I remember the situation. The girlfriend was actually, I won't go into that, but she wasn't there, and I remember being on the phone. I've used too much, and I've just walked out the door, and I've hit the deck, and some poor public person found me. And like, if I hadn't have walked out that door that day, the girlfriend wasn't coming home for another 8 hours. I would be dead cold in that room. But I just happened to walk out that front door and then hit the deck and get resuscitated by ambulance paramedics. The poor people having to, like, this happens hundreds of times every day, overdoses. And just going back on those deaths, this week, Nesh, 2 people have died. This week that I knew both of them, beautiful people, very well, and I've had that. Some months there might be 3 people within my community that die. Maybe there's only 1 but it's been a constant the last 10 years. I'm in a war zone, man. Like, there's nothing, I don't know that there's any other community in the world, anything like the amount of deaths, except for being in a war zone. Quite like heroin addiction. It's all heroin, mate. A couple of them you might get a couple of drunk slips in the shower who have hemorrhaged, and that's happened. Or a couple of people who've died, one by a motorbike accident or a car accident, but mostly it's just all heroin overdose related, It's horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously want to continue on with the, kind of looking at and exploring, what happens post these, 22 clean days, and then obviously I think you call it bust, maybe what we can do is kind of just pause here,
Sure.
and then we can kind of reconvene, have a organised to chat again, and go from that point.
No worries, Nesh. I really appreciate it, mate. It's actually, it's nice to talk about. None of it is hard to talk about. You mentioned hard. It's not. If I get a bit teary or a bit, it's actually gratitude that's coming through. It's not sadness at all. Please get that. It's not at all. I get really happy that I cry almost,
What are you grateful for? What you're talking about, the gratitude?
Oh, wow. Just for my life, for the ability to have connections with people. I'm grateful. I align gratitude, serenity, and spiritual connection, all the same thing. It's this thing that's in me right now that I just feel so happy, mate. Like it's like just this interview. I've got a couple of meetings today for my business, which I really hope we get an opportunity to speak about in the future. I go to everything, mate. I don't know. I can't explain it. My spirit is alive. Like this is my drug right now. This stuff, life, often makes me feel. I've been to the gym this morning, so I'm a bit pumped there too. Just that stuff.
I'm feeling it now myself.
Good.
You got to be careful. That stuff is, spreads quite quickly like wildfire. So be careful with it. It's potent.
Yeah,
I feel myself kind of tearing up with this opportunity and gratitude to speak with you. So looking forward to part 2. For the listeners, keep listening because we'll just cut it straight in. Thanks.
Thank you, Nesh.
Hey everyone, my name is String. I'm the podcast producer here, also Nesh's brother. I hope you enjoyed this first episode with Danny. It's pretty mind-blowing, the kind of life that Danny has led. And in part 2, in the next episode, Danny and Nesh talk about the road to recovery and what Danny's doing now. So it's pretty spectacular, his transformation from addiction to recovery and going into the business world and launching his own app, and what he's doing now with the app and helping his community. So you'll love it. Just search for Danny Part 2, or if you in your podcast player, just go to the next episode. One other thing, if you do like this, I know Nesh and I, we've put a lot of effort in the last 5 months in getting the podcast launched and guests, and we're kind of on a bit of a roll getting really cool guests and more coming up. Now, if you like it, just do share it. It'll help us, and also share the message in this episode of Danny, and in upcoming and past episodes for the guests that Nesh has interviewed. So thanks for your support, and see you on the next episode.